educators, welcome to our channel. Today we are hosting very interesting guest speaker, an associate professor of Kazakh, Makisheva Mariyash Kaidaluylovna. Welcome to our interview and thank you for that you have agreed to come and share some information with us. Would you be so kind to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much for the invitation to this specific podcast of International Relations faculty. Let me introduce myself. I'm 73. I have two children. A daughter, she's a doctor, and a son. He is a lawyer, but he didn't work as a lawyer because he was severely beaten in 1994. And I'm from the northern part of Kazakhstan. You are so interested from what part of the republic. I would like to express my deep gratitude to those who organized this interview because it is my first time to speak in front of such kind of, podcasts. I will try not to abuse your time, and I will try to mention only the most important, stages of my life.
How did you decide to get foreign languages as your future profession?
When I was in the 11th grade, there was one teacher of English, Valentina Grigorievna. She traveled much. She visited a lot of places, and I was delighted by her stories, and I decided, even at that time, to continue my studies and to master foreign languages, because it was my dream to travel much and to get acquainted with different people, different states. And the second thing that gave me a kind of impetus to continue my studies, foreign languages, was my father. He advised me to go not to the Russian, cities as Omsk, Tomsk, or Gorky. And he advised me to go to Almaty because to continue my studies the Kazakh language. It was my problem. At that time, of course, my knowledge in Kazakh was poor. And I arrived in Almaty. Mm-hmm. And my first experience in the field of translating and interpreting was the participation as a translator in the symposium organized within the frame of the World Health Organization. The so-called was in 1978. It was a very challenging, task to translate because I was not so acknowledged in this field. I didn't know the medical terms, but during 3 days, we were told to learn all the vocabulary, the essential vocabulary, and to translate, to be interpreters with the delegation from Vietnam, Malaysia, Burma, and some other countries. About 50 countries participated in this symposium. The topic of the symposium was the first medical aid in the developing states.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Being young, were you tempted to leave your profession of teacher?
Oh, I never thought about such kind of things. I was never tempted to leave my profession, because I was so delighted to work with young people, with students. They were really a lot of, nice, high-paid jobs offered. Mm-hmm. But I decided to stay at the university and to work with the students.
Okay, thank you. You have been working for 53 years, right? Do you feel the difference between the students of that period and the students of the 21st century?
Of course, we cannot say that there is no difference between the students of those years and now in the 21st century. The students of the 21st century are rather pragmatic, though they have every opportunity to continue their studies. They have every opportunity to use different sources, different resources, different devices, different gadgets. But in those years when in the 70s, there were no the internet, channels on internet, websites, And the students worked hard and they tried to do their best to find some new information. They read much, they followed the current events, they read different, newspapers, and they got the information from those, sources, not internet sources.
Being a professional of higher education for a long period, what would you recommend to enhance the quality of education nowadays?
In general, of course, I cannot say that I finished or graduated from courses or schools of interpreters or translators, but it was simply so we tried to use our knowledge from different sources, and we had our practice from our life experience. And for example, in 1990, we were invited to render some translation services, interpreting and translation services, even in the, official bodies like the Supreme Council. I still remember the moment when my colleague Suleimanova and me were taken to the building of the Supreme Soviet. It was in 1994, before the elections, if I'm not mistaken, and before the dissolution of the Supreme Soviet, and before the adoption of the new constitution, and we translated some classified documents. We were kept in that building under guard during the whole day. I still remember that day. It was really a challenging, obligation or responsibility to translate those classified documents. And besides, in 1991, I was awarded a very interesting and rigorous, grant from IREX. I visited Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and I stayed there for 2 months. It gave me some kind of confidence that I can do something. And when I came back, I tried to participate in all kinds of conferences, summits, forums, and I was not so fearing that I may be failed or something of this kind.
That's nice. Because at times it was really hard to go to the US to have such a wonderful experience.
Especially in the 90s after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Yes, there were a lot of restrictions, but besides that, after this IREX program, we were invited to participate in the peace walk. About 100 Americans and 100 Soviet people, walked and visited 5 districts where the nuclear test site was located. It was also impressive and touching, event before the closure of the nuclear test site. And in 1996, a very, impressive moment, or memorable moment is the participation as a coordinator and the translator interpreter during the 26th Jubilee Summer Olympic Games in Atlanta, the USA. Though it was very difficult to work because different teams, different people, we translated, we decided a lot of problems inside this campus where they were located, our tourists. And then there were a lot of interesting moments where I participated as a translator, coordinator, or interpreter. For example, one of the serious conferences was held in 1994 when the WTO session was held here in Almaty. It was also very challenging. There were a lot of serious issues discussed during that period.
WTO, you mean World Trade Organization?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So I see you have brought some books and you have published several books in teaching and learning foreign languages.
So besides the academic process, of course, I was engaged in compiling and writing or creating or developing, textbooks, educational manuals. For example, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a great need of the manuals or textbooks in the Kazakh language. And with my colleague, Professor Kayerbaeva, we published 2 parts of the textbook, Al-Shantala for the first year students and Al-Shantala for the second year students, of course. So they were considered to be of great importance, especially at that period when we were in great need of such kind of, books. And besides, of course, there were other this one I consider to be very important for the students, even for the master's degree students, for example, because in our curriculum we have such kind of discipline as the fundamentals or basics of oral and written translation. And these texts may be used, widely used by the students, yes, during their classes. The texts, the content of this textbook is divided into 4 parts, even 5 parts, for international relations students, for international law students, then important documents, signed by the states, then famous people who were engaged in this field. One of the most, important stages of my life is after graduating from Almaty Pedagogical Institute of Foreign Languages with honors, I was sent to Kazakh state faculty named after Sergei Mironovich Kirov. At that time, of course, there were only 2 departments of foreign languages, the Department of Foreign Languages for Humanities and the Department of Foreign Languages for Natural Sciences. I was sent to the Department of Foreign Languages for Humanities. And I don't know whether it was a tradition or it was one of the requirements. Young specialists who were applying to work at the university were taken to the rector's office. At that time, the rector of the university was a famous, academician, Zolazbekov Omirbek Arislanovich. And the head of our department was the German Viktor Alexandrovich. So I was taken to the rector's office. The rector himself interviewed me. He asked some interesting questions, and then he gave me a sheet of paper with the text. I don't remember exactly whether it was an official letter or it was the text in mechanics and mathematics. I looked through. At that time, I was very self-confident, young, no stress, no fear. I looked through and conveyed the main idea of the text. The rector uttered only 3 words. Хорошо, идите оформляйтесь. That was a very interesting moment in my life. So, there are, of course, a lot of interesting points. I remember the period when at the university, it was a great need of our own specialists for foreign services. And the so-called specialized department was opened. And I still remember the names of those famous students or graduates. Zanara Janova, Murat Nurtlev, Yerzan Ashikbayev, Azamat Abdumominov, Davrin Abayev, Khairat Abdrahmanov, Talgat Unaybayev, and many, many others. I've given the names only of those who were assigned to different high-ranking positions, and I'm proud, immensely proud of them.
Would you be kind to talk about the department in which you are working now? Are there any changes in the department that you are working now?
It's okay, with pleasure. At the very beginning, I have already mentioned that I have been working here for 52 years in the Faculty of International Relations. I've been working for about 30 years. And now our department is called not the Department of Foreign Languages simply, but it is it was renamed some years ago as the Department of Diplomatic Translation. And 2 years ago, a new specialty was set up at our department. It is called as Translation Studies in the field of international and legal relations. So it is a very challenging, department, because to become a translator or an interpreter during 2 or 4 years, of course, it's impossible. It demands, a great and hard job in order to become a professional translator. And a good piece of advice, in order to become a translator, you should keep in mind, the principal requirements. The first, you should possess, perfect knowledge of the source language. You should possess the perfect knowledge of the target language, and you should be knowledgeable in the subject matters. Though it is very difficult to know all the fields of all disciplines, of course, but nevertheless, you should try to enrich your vocabulary, to pay attention to all those, specific difficulties. For example, while translating or interpreting, you will come across a lot of difficulties in the level of stylistic, semantic, grammatical, or vocabulary and phraseological units. One of the main, impediments may be the translation or interpreting. Translation, it's okay, you may consult some dictionaries, but interpreting phraseological units will be very difficult. That's why you should be able to keep all those things in mind. For example, how to translate to sit on the fence. You won't translate as сидеть на заборе. It acquires quite different meaning as занимать выжидательную позицию. And there are a lot of such kind of phraseological units which need specific approach to keep in mind and to learn them, to know them.
So knowing Kazakh language matters to become a good interpreter in the sphere of diplomacy, in international relations.
Though I've never tried myself in translation or in translating or interpreting from Kazakh into English or from English into Kazakh, but nevertheless, I should mention and that all the students or all those postgraduates who are planning to work in this field, you should know the Kazakh language perfectly well, because it is the analytical language. It is very difficult to translate from the Kazakh into English or from English into Russian. It is much easier to translate into Russian, but the Kazakh language requires some specific approaches.
Thank you.
One more moment in my life, that was the visit of our professors from the university, led by Vice Rector Mironova. At that time, she was Vice Rector, the First Lady. Mironova Nadezhda Grigorievna, then Professor Mustafin, Professor Ilimesov, then Associate Professor Ivatova, then Associate Professor Saitova. We went to the Oklahoma State University in 1997. It was a very interesting and very, challenging, moment, because each of them had their own schedule. Each of them had their own, plans of delivering lectures at different faculties. And I was the only person who had to translate their lectures. That was the moment that I still remember, how it was difficult, but at the same time, it was very interesting.
So you managed to find time for everyone?
Simply, I asked them to have their own plans. For example, I cannot be divided into 6 parts. That's why they decided to make their plan. For example, today, on the 1st of June, or September, it was in September. On the 1st of September, I will deliver lectures to the students of political department, and I was to go with him, with Mustafin, with economists. That was another day, and so on. We tried to find out the way
Mariyash Kaidaluylovna, thank you for sharing your wonderful stories and dear moments with us, and I really appreciate your sincereness and nice ideas. Wish you professional creativity and inspiration and health.
It is very important when you have very reliable support on the part of your family. And I think that I had and I have been, I'm still having powerful support from my family. Usually young specialists or my young colleagues ask me, how did you reach such kind of, level of your in your profession? But I usually say success is what? Success cannot be reached in a twinkle of an eye. Success is this sum of small efforts repeated from day in and day out. And in conclusion, I would like to mention the famous statement of Nelson Mandela that is displayed at the entrance of the University of South Africa. It is still there. Destroying of any state, you don't need the use of atomic bombs. You don't need the use of long-range nuclear missiles. Lowering of the quality of education and allowing the students to cheat at the examinations will lead to such kind of, disastrous results. Inexperienced doctors, incompetent or half-educated engineers, insatiable, for example, leaders and judges. The collapse of education is the collapse of a nation. I don't think that the university, Al-Farabi Kazakh University, will lead us to such kind of, disastrous situation. I am very proud that Al-Farabi Kazakh National University is doing its best to enhance the quality of education, not only at the university. We are ranking among the leading universities of the world. Good luck. I wish to our students to have more smart students, and good luck in the academic process, in research, because now we have gained another status. Now we are not simply considered as the national university, but we are considered as the research university. And most of our students are involved, are engaged in researches in different fields.
Thank you so much. It was a really nice talk with you. Dear spectators, we have come up to the end of our interview. Thank you for supporting us. Subscribe to our channel and goodbye.